Hi, I'm Nina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the deep dive. You know the drill. We take that fire hose of global information that just hits you every day and we try to turn it down into something manageable.
Yeah, and we try to pull out those essential, sometimes really surprising nuggets of knowledge.
And today's stack is massive. If I had to give it one single headline, it would probably be something like the age of uncertainty.
It really is. I mean, if you look across all of our sources today, from these incredibly high-stakes geopolitical negotiations all the way to, breakthrough discoveries in deep science and just astonishing volatility in the markets.
You get this really strange, complex picture.
Exactly. It's this mix of deep global anxiety colliding head-on with this profound, unstoppable human ingenuity. It feels like we're building these incredible things while, at the same time, creating just incredible disorder.
Absolutely. So our mission today isn't just to report the news, it's really to navigate this landscape. It's marked by these rapid political shifts, staggering technological acceleration, especially in AI, and frankly, a deeply troubling surge in extreme targeted violence.
Right. The goal is to extract some clarity from all that chaos.
To give you the context, you need to understand why all this stuff matters right now.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And we've kind of organized this deep dive around three core areas that I think really define this moment.
Okay.
First, we're going to tackle the fundamental reshaping of what we're calling the new great power dynamic. That's all the geopolitics, diplomacy, the ongoing wars.
Then we pivot.
Then we pivot to the new frontier. That covers space, deep science, and some of the ancient mysteries being completely rewritten by archaeology.
Which I love.
And finally, we'll get into the AI content crisis and some of the really harsh economic reality checks that are sweeping through major global industries right now.
Okay, let's unpack all of this, starting with probably the largest structural shift, how world powers are rearranging themselves, focusing first on that ongoing conflict in Ukraine.
And the massive, massive negotiations happening around its future security.
We've had a significant number of reports on this, these really complex, multi-sided negotiations involving Ukraine, the United States, and Europe.
And it's all about territorial guarantees, security after the conflict, all the big questions.
Right, and setting the scene here is just vital because the dialogue is now happening on, what, two parallel tracks?
It really is. So track one is all about political signaling. You have Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky describing the recent talks with the U.S. in Berlin, Germany as productive.
Productive, the classic diplomatic term.
The classic term. But behind that language, our sources are confirming that these fundamental divisions, they absolutely remain, especially over territorial agreements.
Crimea and the Donbass region.
That's the unavoidable core of the conflict, yes.
And the American response to this deadlock seems to be leaning into a form of support that we really haven't seen before, outside of a direct treaty.
Exactly. So the U.S. has formally proposed what they're calling a NATO-like security guarantee for Ukraine.
NATO-like.
And those words are chosen very carefully. It's a deliberate mechanism. The offer is designed to reshape the whole geopolitical landscape by providing, hard, credible deterrence against any future Russian aggression.
And to really bolster Ukraine's defense capabilities, we're talking advanced weaponry, intelligence sharing, that sort of thing.
All of it. But let's define NATO-like, because this is absolutely crucial. You have to understand, this is not NATO's Article 5.
A critical distinction.
A critical distinction. So NATO's Article 5, as you know, stipulates that an attack on one member is an attack on all. It requires collective defense.
It's basically an automatic military intervention by everyone in the alliance.
Right. The proposed U.S. guarantee is fundamentally different. It would be a bilateral, or maybe multilateral, agreement that outlines specific defense assistance, arms shipments, long-term financial support.
But it avoids that automatic trigger for war.
It studiously avoids it. It's designed to provide the maximum possible security without dragging the entire NATO alliance into a direct, hot war with Russia.
And this guarantee, it's being presented as a stepping stone, right? It's not the final destination.
That's right. This security framework is being proposed as a necessary precondition before any formal discussion of actual NATO membership can even begin.
It's like a legal and military buffer period.
That's a good way to put it. The U.S. and its allies are essentially saying, look, we will make you strong enough to deter an attack on your own first, and then we can talk about you joining the club.
Okay, but now we have to talk about the massive wrench being thrown into this whole carefully constructed diplomatic plan.
You're talking about the political discourse in the U.S.
Exactly. We heard former President Trump express a lot of optimism for a swift resolution, but the reports confirm his position, which he's outlined before, would require Ukraine to renounce its claims to Crimea and Donbas.
which are territories that Russia already views as their own sovereign domain.
Right. So that creates an immediate and, likely insurmountable hurdle for Kyiv.
Of course. President Zelensky has been completely consistent on this. The option of making territorial concessions is just not on the table.
Not unless those concessions are secured by some ironclad Western security guarantee first.
Exactly. So the tension is clear. You have a segment of U.S. political thought pushing for a peace deal that satisfies Russia's territorial demands.
While at the same time, the Western European partners are scrambling to offer concrete military leverage to Ukraine to avoid that exact outcome.
And the Europeans are taking some massive steps on their own, trying to build collective security independent of any U.S. political volatility.
They are mobilizing a serious commitment.
Yeah, you have Germany, the United Kingdom, and several other major European nations outlining a plan for a European-led multinational military force.
And the goals are, they're ambitious.
Yeah.
And very expensive.
Incredibly ambitious. To regenerate Ukraine's military capabilities, secure its airspace, establish monitoring for any ceasefire actions.
And this proposal is tied to some highly controversial funding ideas.
Indeed it is. The plan includes significant military and economic support, but with the added possibility of using frozen Russian assets to pay for it all.
And just to give you a sense of the scale here, the Russian central bank has already started litigation against Euroclear in Belgium.
They're demanding the return of over $230 billion in immobilized assets. Moscow is calling it theft, a violation of international financial law.
That legal landscape sounds incredibly complicated and just fraught with risks.
Oh, it is. International financial institutions, including the European Central Bank, they've warned repeatedly that using those frozen sovereign assets could have profound destabilizing effects.
How so?
Well, it could erode confidence in the euro as a global reserve currency. It could provoke a much broader economic fallout, not just with Russia, but with other major global trading partners who are now worried about the precedent of asset seizure.
A move with massive long-term consequences.
Huge. Which brings us directly to the Russian counter-narrative. And in the interest of impartiality and just understanding the full picture, we have to report this clearly.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has been very vocal.
He offered an extraordinarily blistering critique. He accused the European Union of being quack doctors.
Quack doctors.
His words. He claims they're just administering symptomatic relief, sanctions, arms, while completely failing to address what he views as the underlying disease.
Which, in his view, is aggressive NATO expansion eastward.
Precisely. He argues that the EU's current strategy, which is all about unifying nations against Russia, reflects this arrogant and historically dangerous mindset that just denies Russia its own legitimate security concerns.
And he used some pretty potent historical analogies to make his point. He wasn't mincing words.
Not at all. He drew direct parallels. He suggested that the EU's efforts to weaken Russia are going to fail, just like historical adversaries like Napoleon in the 19th century and Adolf Hitler in the 20th ultimately failed.
The implication being that Western antagonism is this eternal, misguided, and ultimately self-defeating strategy against Russia.
That's his framing of history. It's stark, it's aggressive, but that's the narrative.
But Lavrov didn't just focus on Europe's alleged decline. He positioned Russia as looking towards a very different future.
He did. He highlighted Africa as a key, stable, and rapidly emerging pillar in what he calls the burgeoning multipolar world order.
It's a strategic diplomatic move.
Absolutely. He's contrasting that alleged stability and rising influence in the global south with what he claims is the instability and militarism he sees resurging in Europe, particularly in Germany's new defense posture.
So his core view is that this crisis is just exposing the West's decline and accelerating a global power shift to other parts of the world.
That's the argument.
Okay, let's shift our lens dramatically now. We're moving from Eastern Europe to the Western Hemisphere and focusing on a really decisive political trend across the Americas.
We're talking about the Latin American rightward shift.
Yes.
And this is a significant regional wave. Chile is really the centerpiece right now, with the recent electoral victory of José Antonio Cast.
His win marks a profound shift towards the far right in that nation.
It really does. And it reflects a wider regional trend that seems to be propelled by growing public concerns over security, crime, and migration.
He ran on a very specific, very hardline platform.
Absolutely. Cast centered his entire campaign on a strict law and order agenda. He was calling for significantly tougher immigration policies, even issuing public warnings for undocumented migrants to leave the country voluntarily before he was even inaugurated.
And that's a powerful populist message. It taps directly into that social anxiety over security.
And the perceived failure of existing progressive policies to handle it. And his success is not isolated. It's being felt across the political spectrum in the region.
Progressive figures are definitely taking note.
Oh, for sure. Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico, for instance. She openly views Cast's win as a serious wake-up call for the entire Latin American left.
She's urging progressives to reassess their strategies and, address public security concerns more effectively.
But here's the interesting part about Chile's position. Cast's politics are complicated by its economy. He might align culturally with figures like former President Trump, but who's his key economic partner?
It's China.
It's China. The pragmatism of trade reigns supreme here. Despite his ideological leanings, Chile will almost certainly maintain its very pragmatic and extensive economic relationship with China.
Which is its largest single trading partner.
And that relationship is particularly crucial in the vital lithium sector. Chile is a global leader in lithium production, a resource that's critical for the world's EV battery production.
So you have this tension, ideologically aligned with one bloc, the U.S. and the West, but economically tethered to another, China.
That is the definition of modern multipolarity.
And we see that same geopolitical fiction playing out in the Caribbean, too, especially with Venezuela.
Venezuela is definitely showing its muscle. And this is despite, or maybe because of recent economic upturns. According to CEPAL, that's the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean,
Right.
Venezuela is actually projected to lead regional economic growth in 2025.
Which is a sharp contrast to its aggressive political moves, like cutting off gas supplies to Trinidad and Tobago.
Right. And why the sudden cut?
Well, Caracas cited Trinidad and Tobago's alleged complicity with what Venezuela views as U.S. crimes in the region.
So Venezuela frames this as a strategic move, a necessary response to perceived hostile actions that undermine their sovereignty.
Specifically pointing to the U.S. logistical presence in Trinidad and Tobago.
And how did Trinidad and Tobago respond?
They immediately deepened their military and logistical relationship with the U.S.
They permitted U.S. military access to their airfields.
Primarily for logistical operations and, critically, for radar installation right after these tensions with Venezuela heightened.
So it's drawing them further into the U.S. sphere of security influence.
It really is. And then moving north, you have this domestic crisis brewing in Honduras, fueled by deep political mistrust.
The electoral turmoil there is severe. The Libre Party, which is currently in power, is actively mobilizing citizens, staging protests at the National Vote Counting Center.
And this is amid escalating concerns of irregularities and alleged electoral fraud.
Right, this whole movement is fueled by widespread dissatisfaction over economic hardship and corruption, and they're demanding a rigorous, independent recount.
And this political heat is amplified by external pressure from the U.S., which has a long history of intervention in Honduran politics.
That is a crucial layer of context here. We saw these policy tools deployed under the previous Trump administration, a policy that some analysts have dubbed the Monroe Doctrine.
Can you clarify that for our listeners?
Sure. So the original 19th century Monroe Doctrine asserted that European powers shouldn't interfere in the Americas.
Right.
This so-called Monroe Doctrine asserts U.S. preeminence with a highly interventionist and aggressive approach, often blending security and political interests.
And what did that policy involve specifically in Honduras?
Well, reports detail that the Trump administration actively endorsed the conservative candidate Nasrius Fura, while simultaneously executing the highly controversial pardon of the former president, Juan Orlando Hernandez.
Who was serving a 45-year drug trafficking sentence in the U.S.
Yes. The administration reportedly even threatened to cut off U.S. aid if Asfura did not win.
So it highlights these strategic U.S. interests like countering Chinese influence and ensuring cooperation on migration and drugs.
And the Honduran people are left grappling with their own election integrity, while operating under this heavy shadow of U.S. economic and political dependency.
Okay, transitioning to direct military actions. The U.S. is not shying away from using hard power to address threats, particularly narco-trafficking in the Eastern Pacific.
No, the U.S. Southern Command recently detailed military strikes in the Eastern Pacific on suspected drug boats. These actions resulted in the killing of 8 individuals.
And the military justifies these as necessary responses against powerful, violent cartels operating in international waters.
But these actions also face intense scrutiny over their legality.
Of course, accusations of extrajudicial killings.
Absolutely, especially after reports of a previous incident, a double-tap strike in September, where secondary strikes allegedly killed survivors of the initial attack.
And the legality of using targeted military force against non-state actors outside of a declared war zone is, it's a legal gray area at best.
It's a very complex and debated area, and it ties directly into the geopolitical tension in the region.
Right, because the U.S. openly accuses Venezuela's President Maduro of harboring drug smugglers and facilitating their operations.
And Maduro vehemently denies these accusations. He calls the U.S. claims an attempt to fabricate a war for regime change and to justify these aggressive military actions.
Meanwhile, we look across the Atlantic to instability in Africa. The situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC, it remains dire.
M23 rebels continue to cause just chaos, targeting these mineral-rich regions which are economically vital but geographically very vulnerable.
And this conflict has displaced an estimated 200,000 people.
It has. On a very small, maybe slightly positive note, the M23 did agree to a U.S. request to withdraw from the strategic city of Uvira, but the larger conflict over resources, that remains persistent.
And the humanitarian picture across several regions, according to the International Rescue Committee, or IRC, is just catastrophic.
Yeah, the IRC's 2026 emergency watch list flagged Sudan and Palestine as the 2 regions most at risk of catastrophic humanitarian crises globally.
And what's crucial about the IRC report is that it doesn't just list the suffering. It specifically highlights how geopolitical rivalry is making it worse.
How so?
It noted that the increasing number of vetoes in the United Nations Security Council, the UNSC, is actively hindering aid and resolution efforts.
So, for example, Russia has obstructed ceasefires and aid corridors in Sudan, while the U.S. has vetoed Gaza truce resolutions.
And these vetoes, driven by major power competition, they prevent the international community from acting decisively.
The numbers are staggering. These countries on the watch list, they represent only about 12% of the global population, but they account for 89% of the estimated 300 million people worldwide who require humanitarian aid.
That duality is just, it's truly staggering. We're talking about these cosmic shifts in power, Russia versus the West, the U.S. versus China, while foundational human safety systems are just crumbling on the ground.
It's an immense complexity in human conflict.
Which is why I think we need to look at where our focus goes when we look beyond ourselves, to the new frontiers that often offer a startling simplicity and just a profound elegance in the laws of nature.
I think that's a good place to go next.
Let's reset. We just covered a whole lot of global chaos.
Okay.
I need a breather, and frankly, I'm hoping our science stack gives us something beautiful and, a little mind-bending.
I think it will. The tools of human ingenuity really shine here. We're looking forward to NASA's upcoming mission for the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope.
NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration.
That's the one. It's set to conduct a high-latitude, wide-area survey, and it's specifically designed to map cosmic voids.
Cosmic voids, that sounds like a whole lot of nothing. What are we looking for in the empty parts of space?
Well, they're critical regions, and they are definitely not nothing to a cosmologist. These are vast, relatively empty regions of space that contain very few galaxies.
And recent research suggests these voids are actually contained within these enormous web-like structures. They're called cosmic bubbles.
That's the idea. So how does mapping the empty parts tell us about the fundamental structure of the universe?
That's my question.
It's by precisely mapping the distribution of these voids and analyzing their light, specifically their redshifts.
Okay, a redshift is a core concept in astronomy. It means the light waves from distant objects are stretched out toward the red end of the spectrum as the objects move away from us.
Right, because space itself is expanding.
Yeah.
And measuring this effect, how much the light is stretched, allows scientists to calculate the speed and the distance of these voids.
Got it. And what does that calculation tell us?
It lets us understand the influence of dark matter and dark energy across the universe's entire architecture.
Dark matter accounts for, what, about 27% of the total mass energy density?
Roughly, yeah. And dark energy is what's driving the accelerated expansion of the universe. So by tracking the distribution of matter in voids, The Roman telescope will refine our models of this expansion.
So it could either confirm or maybe completely upend decades of theoretical physics?
It's looking at the emptiness to understand the fundamental physics of everything.
That is just phenomenal. And speaking of phenomenal telescopes, the James Webb Space Telescope, the JWST, is giving us new insights into dark matter too.
It is, but in a completely different way, by looking at really early galaxies.
How does that work?
Well, the JWST is so sensitive that it might be able to illuminate dark matter by focusing on these intricate, web-like filamentary structures that connect galaxies in the early universe.
So the idea is that dark matter is heavily clustered in these invisible filaments, like a cosmic scaffolding.
Exactly. And if JWST can map the motion of ordinary matter relative to this structure, it might finally offer direct evidence of how this unseen substance influences how galaxies form.
And then the JWST went and found something truly bizarre, a planet that just defies conventional planetary science.
Ah, yes. PSR J2322226CB. It's a Jupiter-mass exoplanet. And it's just mind-bending for a few reasons.
Okay, lay them on me.
First, its orbit. It's hugging its parent star, which is a pulsar, rapidly spinning neutron star, only about 1 million miles away.
Wow.
Second, the planet is physically distorted. It's in the shape of a lemon because of the intense tidal forces and gravitational stress from the pulsar.
But the really shocking discovery was its atmosphere.
Absolutely. Its atmosphere has this bizarre helium and, crucially, a molecular carbon-rich composition.
For context, typical gas giants are mostly hydrogen and helium.
Right, so molecular carbon in these quantities is highly unusual.
Molecular carbon, that suggests a planet made of incredibly heavy elements existing in a really extreme environment. What are the implications?
Well, scientists are actively debating this. Traditional planetary formation theories simply do not account for a planet with such a carbon-enriched atmosphere existing so close to a pulsar.
So what are they thinking?
Theorists are now discussing the strong implication of potential soot clouds in the upper atmosphere,
Soot clouds.
and even the possibility of diamond formation within the planet's crushing depths. This lemon-shaped oddity is challenging everything we thought we knew about how planets form and how they can sustain themselves in such incredibly hostile, radiation-drenched environments.
I am just continually impressed by the elegance of the universe and the complexity of its physics.
Amazing.
Okay, let's pull back to our own system. We're getting a visit from an interstellar tourist comet 3ILS.
This is significant. Comet 3ILS is the first confirmed interstellar comet we've observed since 2019. That means it originated completely outside of our solar system.
And it's making its closest approach on December 19th.
That's right. At about 1.1 astronomical units, which is roughly 100 million kilometers away from Earth, scientists are mobilizing everything to study its composition.
Hoping it reveals clues about the conditions in other stellar nurseries.
Exactly. And it's behaving strangely, even for a comet.
How so?
Observers have noted a very distinct physical jet extending from its surface, pointing directly toward the sun. It's this strange glow, like a highly localized gas and dust release.
And that specific observation gives us valuable insights into how these deep space objects react when they get heated up by our star.
Right. And while rumors of it being an alien spaceship were, rampant,
As they always are.
NASA politely reminded everyone it's just a very fast, very weird space rock.
Just a weird space rock, but a fascinating data point. Okay, let's ground ourselves back on Earth, specifically in the history right beneath our feet.
Archaeology is providing us with some profound gifts and technological lessons, starting with ancient Roman ingenuity.
The secrets of ancient Roman concrete being unearthed from a workshop in Pompeii in Italy.
And these discoveries have revealed why Roman concrete, the material still holding up structures like the Pantheon 2 millennia later, is vastly more durable than our modern Portland cement.
Wait, so this ancient material is chemically capable of repairing itself in the ground? What's the mechanism behind this self-healing?
That's the key insight. Modern engineers had always assumed the Romans were just meticulous mixers, but they were actually mixing their materials differently.
Okay.
The Roman concrete was created using a hot mixing process. They took quicklime, which is calcium oxide, and mixed it with volcanic ash at extremely high temperatures.
And this process creates something called lime clasts.
Exactly. They're these tiny, white, highly reactive chunks of lime that are scattered throughout the hardened material.
Yeah.
They weren't mixing errors, they were deliberate ingredients.
So when the concrete inevitably cracks from seismic activity or water or whatever, the water gets in.
And these lime clasts redissolve. They then chemically react with the volcanic ash around them to form new compounds, which recrystallize and fill those microscopic gaps.
That is insane. Ancient ingenuity leading directly to low-carbon, resilient concrete that modern engineers are actively trying to replicate to solve our own environmental challenges.
It's a perfect example of looking back to leap forward. Our concrete today is cheap to make, but highly carbon intensive, and it's prone to failure.
The Roman method suggests a path toward more resilient, low-carbon materials if we can just master their process.
And our gaze is also focused further back in human history, way back with the Littlefoot fossil.
This is a remarkably preserved early hominin skeleton found in the Sterkfontein caves in South Africa.
Its exceptional preservation and its age are generating significant discussion among paleoanthropologists. The initial analysis suggests it represents a potential unknown ancestral species.
So a completely new, complex branch on our evolutionary tree?
Potentially.
Yeah.
Maybe a sister species to the lineage that eventually led to us, to Homo sapiens. This could force us to rethink the entire structure of our ancestral lineage and the timing of key evolutionary traits like bipedalism.
And speaking of rethinking ancient human behavior, archaeologists in Tamaulipas, Mexico, found a 1,500-year-old skull that is cube-shaped.
It is geometrically shocking because it deviates so strongly from any documented traditions.
Cranial modification, binding an infant's head to shape it, was common in many ancient cultures, including the Maya and Inca.
But it typically resulted in tapered, conical, or elongated forms. This skull exhibits a geometric flat top and distinct right angles.
So what does a cube-shaped skull imply?
It suggests a unique, localized cultural practice, maybe a specific belief system that required this precise geometric alteration. Researchers are still trying to figure out what has symbolized hierarchy, clan identity, religious affiliation. Who knows?
And finally, history delivered an actual archaeological administrative error in Egypt's royal necropolis of Tanis.
A delightful twist, millennia in the making. Archaeologists were exploring the necropolis, and they found this impressive tomb attributed to Pharaoh Shoshenq III.
Right.
But when they analyzed the remains inside, they belonged to a different, less significant individual.
So where was the pharaoh?
It turns out Pharaoh Shoshenq III's body was actually interred in a smarter, older tomb that belonged to Pharaoh Osorkon II. The grand, intended tomb remained unused, and his body was essentially shuffled into an earlier, likely more secure one.
That sounds suspiciously like political instability affecting burial plans.
It absolutely reflects the complex, highly fluid nature of tomb reuse during the Third Intermediate Period, which was an era marked by political upheaval. Dynasties were often consolidating tombs for practical and security reasons.
A literal archaeological twist that shows us even pharaohs weren't immune to last-minute logistical changes.
You got it.
Well, whether it's diamond exoplanets or self-healing cement, the intellectual pace of discovery is dizzying. Let's talk about the speed of modern ingenuity, specifically the AI ecosystem and the creator economy that is struggling profoundly to keep up.
The tech sector continues its relentless acceleration, mainly driven by massive investment in artificial intelligence. But it's facing serious scrutiny, both in terms of inflated valuation and its underlying technical vulnerabilities.
Let's start with the AI arms race and just the massive flow of capital. The numbers out of Silicon Valley are staggering.
Databricks, the company specializing in a crucial type of data infrastructure known as the data lakehouse architecture,
Right.
just completed a successful $4 billion Series L funding round. Its valuation skyrocketed to an incredible $134 billion.
And that valuation just underscores the immense, almost existential demand for enterprise AI solutions.
Yeah, for our listeners, a data lakehouse combines the flexibility of a data lake for storing raw data with the structure of a data warehouse for fast analysis. It's the foundational infrastructure you need to train and deploy complex AI models.
Especially after their recent partnership with Anthropic.
And this highlights a broader consolidation and strategic control game being played by the tech giants.
You mean like NVIDIA, a leader in computing tech, the critical provider of the GPUs, the graphics processing units that power most AI models.
Right, and they're bolstering their position on the software side now. They acquired SkedMD, the primary developer behind something called Slurm.
Why is a software acquisition so important for a hardware company like NVIDIA?
Because Slurm is the workload manager used by over 60% of the TOP 500 supercomputers globally.
Wow.
So by acquiring SkedMD, NVIDIA gains control over the software that schedules and manages these huge computational tasks. It lets them optimize the workflow for their own GPUs and further solidify that synergy between their hardware and the massive AI workloads.
It's a huge play for end-to-end control.
It is. And this global chip race is fundamentally geopolitical, especially when we look at China's push for self-reliance.
Baron Technology, an AI chip startup based in China, is planning a Hong Kong IPO to raise $300 million.
And this move is directly backed by the Chinese government's urgent drive for self-reliance in advanced semiconductors. It's a response to U.S. export controls aimed at throttling China's access to high-end chips for AI.
The global technology market is now a direct extension of geopolitical strategy.
It is. But this hyper-acceleration is revealing some unexpected soft spots in the AI models themselves, particularly when it comes to security.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, researchers released a study detailing what they're calling the poetry jailbreak. They found that major AI language models, we're talking powerful systems like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, can be consistently duped by prompts formatted as poetry.
Wait. You mean if you ask the AI to generate harmful or restricted content, it blocks it. But if you phrase the request as a sonnet or an iambic pentameter, it might just do it.
Essentially, yes. The poetic structure acts as a form of adversarial technique, and it successfully bypasses the safety filters that are designed to flag dangerous keywords and direct instructions.
Why does that work?
Well, researchers are still working to pinpoint the exact mechanism, but the leading theory involves something called tokenization.
Okay, what is tokenization in this context?
When an AI model processes language, it breaks it down into small units, or tokens. The safety filters are primarily looking at the sequence and meaning of tokens from direct instructions. The hypothesis is that when a prompt is formatted into complex rhythmic or metaphorical structures, like poetry, the model interprets the input tokens as being primarily focused on artistic context and stylistic output, not a direct actionable command.
So the safety filters just become less reactive.
Exactly.
That is fascinating and deeply unsettling, that human creativity can inadvertently become a security vulnerability.
And we're seeing that same verification weakness in historical and factual applications too.
You mean the AI-generated reconstructions of ancient Rome?
Yes, they've been found to be just riddled with historical inaccuracies. It highlights a critical lesson. AI output is only as good as the data it was trained on and the validation it receives.
It emphasizes the continuous, irreplaceable need for critical, expert verification before you trust any AI-generated fact or image.
Which brings us directly to the content crisis. The reckoning over who owns and gets paid for the vast amounts of digital data used to train these AI models.
This is one of the most important battles for the future of the internet. Creative Commons, the nonprofit that provides public licenses for creators to share their work, has weighed in with a groundbreaking proposal.
They're giving tentative support for pay-to-crawl systems.
This sounds like a fundamental shift from their core mission of open access.
It's a massive philosophical tightrope walk. They're trying to balance their core ethos of open access with the economic reality that these AI giants rely on massive, uncompensated swaths of digital content.
So the pay-to-crawl framework suggests that AI companies should financially compensate creators when their public material is used for training.
Right, often through some kind of collective mechanism. But the tension is obvious.
Compensating creators seems necessary and fair.
But critics are intensely worried that mandatory widespread paywalls could seriously hinder access to knowledge, particularly for nonprofits and educational use.
And Creative Commons acknowledged this. They advocated that any system has to include clear tiers or exceptions to make sure that academic, nonprofit, and educational access to research and public domain works remains totally unimpeded.
It's an attempt to find a middle ground between capitalistic monopolization of data and the pure idealism of open access.
And we're seeing that same tension play out in Hollywood, where intellectual property is everything. Disney just announced a strategic partnership with OpenAI.
This is a huge, multifaceted deal, a reported $1 billion investment and a 3-year licensing agreement.
And this allows OpenAI's Sora short-form video platform, the generative AI model, to legally feature over 200 Disney characters from iconic franchises like Marvel and Star Wars.
Which is Disney being both proactive and cautious, securing their IP in the AI space.
Exactly. The exclusivity is key here, but it's only for 1 year.
So they're leveraging the technology now, ensuring they have an early presence in generative AI content creation. But the short exclusivity period underscores their profound caution.
It's a testing phase for the future of character licensing. They don't want to hand over their intellectual property crown jewels for the long term.
Not yet. And shifting briefly to platform competition, Meta's Threads is clearly still gaining momentum as a viable alternative to X, formerly Twitter.
Yeah, Threads now boasts over 150 million daily active users and is adding new community features, testing specialized badges for highly engaged members.
And this is all happening against the backdrop of continuous structural change and instability at X, which positions Threads as a viable long-term competitor.
Okay, now let's wrap this segment with a massive business pivot that proves the market doesn't always follow the hype. Ford Motor Company's electric vehicle reckoning.
This is a textbook example of a huge strategic reversal based on cold market reality. Ford announced it will take a significant $19.5 billion write-down as it pivots aggressively away from a fully electric strategy and back toward hybrid models.
19.5 billion. That is a staggering charge to take. What specifically contributed to this massive failure of strategy?
It was a multi-layered failure that really stemmed from over-optimistic projections. The most specific loss is scrapping the highly anticipated all-electric F-150 Lightning pickup truck.
And the write-down reflects a lot of structural issues. Higher than anticipated production costs.
Slower consumer adoption of EVs outside of, coastal metropolitan areas, and a massive investment required for battery sourcing and charging infrastructure that just wasn't panning out fast enough.
The market just wasn't ready to absorb that many high-cost EV trucks.
So if the EV consumer market is too volatile, where is Ford redirecting all that capital and effort?
They're channeling funds, about $2 billion over the next 2 years, into a totally new adjacent venture, a battery storage business.
A business aimed not at powering cars, but at powering massive stationary installations like data centers and stabilizing the electrical grid.
That is a fascinating pivot. They're solving an infrastructural problem.
Exactly. The explosion of AI, which requires massive data centers, and the growing demand for renewable energy, both require significant grid stabilization tools.
So Ford is leveraging its battery expertise to meet this massive infrastructural demand.
And seeking a more reliable, utility-scale revenue stream than the volatile consumer EV market. They're pivoting from being a direct EV competitor to Tesla to becoming an indirect AI enabler and an infrastructural partner.
And this business decision has an immediate political context, especially in the U.S.
It does. Critics argue that this pivot, combined with ongoing political discourse, where former President Trump is pushing policies favoring fossil fuels,
and rolling back federal fuel efficiency regulations.
it sends a disastrous signal. It essentially concedes the consumer EV market lead to China, which has heavily subsidized and optimized its own domestic EV industry.
So it seems like market realities and political shifts are aligning to slow the green transition domestically, while infrastructure demand is pulling investment in a completely new direction.
It really feels like every area we look at, from geopolitics to Silicon Valley and Detroit, is undergoing a simultaneous high-stress correction.
Let's move next to the human element of that stress, the intersection of crime, justice, and rising global and domestic tensions.
We have to start this segment with the horrifying, devastating anti-Semitic terror attack that occurred in Sydney, Australia. It was during the Hanukkah festival at Bondi Beach.
This incident has been tragically labeled the country's worst mass casualty attack in nearly 3 decades.
It was an unimaginable scene of horror. 15 fatalities were reported, including 2 rabbis, an 87-year-old Holocaust survivor, and a 10-year-old girl.
Authorities identified the perpetrators as a father-son duo, and the attack is strongly believed to be motivated by Islamic State ideology.
The investigation also revealed that the father used an Indian passport, and the pair had visited the Philippines prior to the attack, where they may have met with extremist preachers.
And amidst the tragedy and that calculated hate, there were these incredible acts of spontaneous courage that saved lives.
Ahmed Ahmed, a refugee who happened to be nearby, intervened and bravely tackled one of the gunmen.
Though he was tragically and briefly mistaken for a perpetrator initially by the authorities who were responding to the chaos.
And the political fallout was immediate and unfortunately complicated by international rhetoric.
Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese strongly rejected the accusation from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Australia's recognition of a Palestinian state contributed to the attack.
Albanese was adamant. He stressed there was no operational link to Australian foreign policy, insisting the attack was purely anti-Semitic terror driven by extremist ideology and local radicalization, not a reaction to official government policy.
It was a crucial move to depoliticize the event's motivation.
And the community in New South Wales is now focused on supporting the victims, with Premier Chris Minns defending the bravery of the police officers who were shot while confronting the attackers.
Okay, shifting from terrorism to extreme domestic and personal violence, we have several high-profile cases that really demonstrate these deep underlying societal cracks.
Starting in Massachusetts in the U.S. with the Brian Walsh conviction.
Walsh was found guilty of murdering and dismembering his wife, Anna Walsh. And this case drew massive attention, not just because of the gruesome details, but because the conviction was secured even though Anna's body was never recovered.
That is a significant legal hurdle to overcome, isn't it? Securing a murder conviction without the physical remains of the victim.
It's a critical challenge, and this case sets important legal precedent. The prosecution focused on overwhelming circumstantial evidence.
Walsh admitting to disposing of the body, his highly suspicious internet searches.
Like how to dispose of a 115-pound body.
Right. And his extensive efforts to cover up the crime and obstruct the initial investigation. It highlights the capacity of the legal system to secure justice in these complex cases, even without physical remains.
On the West Coast, we saw the shocking murder of the renowned film director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle, who were found stabbed in their Los Angeles home.
And their son, Nick Reiner, was arrested and is being held on $4 million bail.
Nick Reiner's background provides a crucial and tragic context here.
He has a turbulent public history. He struggled with severe heroin addiction since his mid-teens.
And that personal battle with substance abuse and mental health was actually the inspiration for the film his father co-wrote and directed, Being Charlie.
So the very real-life struggle that inspired a film about recovery tragically ended in this devastating violence.
It just underscores the devastating, corrosive impact that long-term addiction and mental health crises can have. It cuts across every socioeconomic and cultural class,
causing unimaginable harm, even within high-profile, influential families who have access to resources.
And this tragedy was immediately seized upon by the political world,
illustrating the current breakdown in civil discourse.
Former President Trump used the murder, a deeply personal family tragedy, to publicly criticize Rob Reiner, who was a prominent liberal activist and a vocal Trump critic.
And that rhetoric sparked a rare, spontaneous bipartisan Republican backlash, with GOP figures condemning Trump's comments as inappropriate, heartless, and vile given the circumstances.
The tragedy quickly became a highly visible flashpoint over the ethical state of political discourse itself.
And we saw other incidents globally that were driven by personal rage, leading to massive consequences.
Absolutely. In the United Kingdom, Paul Doyle was sentenced to 21 years and 6 months for driving his vehicle into crowds celebrating a Liverpool victory parade.
And the judge specifically stated the act was driven by profound rage, not panic,
resulting in significant injuries and widespread terror.
And separately, back in Sydney, Australia, Kwang Kung Yu, a Taekwondo instructor, received a life sentence without parole for murdering a 7-year-old student and his parents.
A crime shockingly motivated purely by jealousy over the family's perceived wealth.
These are just deeply disturbing examples of unchecked personal violence causing societal devastation.
Let's pivot now to the intersection of law and immigration policy within the U.S. judicial system, specifically in the Midwest.
The federal trial of Circuit Judge Hannah Dugan in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, is highly notable. It's setting the stage for a major legal battle over judicial authority.
She stands accused of obstructing U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, efforts.
And what specifically is the prosecution claiming she did to obstruct ICE?
They claim she helped an undocumented man, Eduardo Flores Ruiz, evade arrest. The specific accusation is that she directed the ICE agents who were there to detain him to go consult with the chief judge about their authority to make arrests inside the courthouse.
So she was stalling them.
And crucially, while she allegedly stalled the federal agents, she simultaneously facilitated the man's escape through a back exit.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Keith Alexander characterized this as a deliberate breach of her judicial responsibilities and federal law.
So the defense argues she was just following proper courthouse protocol, ensuring the agents followed procedure.
And the prosecution argues deliberate obstruction, making this a test case for sanctuary policies.
That's the core tension. This case highlights the growing conflict between local judicial responsibility, which is often influenced by these sanctuary policy philosophies, and federal immigration mandates.
And the Trump administration has historically pursued local officials who resist federal enforcement directives. If she's convicted, Judge Dugan faces up to 6 years in prison.
It shows the seriousness of the federal approach to officials perceived to be actively resisting deportation.
Moving to public health. A labor crisis is unfolding in the UK's National Health Service, the NHS, and it's colliding directly with a winter health emergency.
Yes, resident doctors in England have voted to proceed with a planned 5-day strike right in the middle of what's being described as a severe flu outbreak.
An outbreak that is already straining the NHS to its absolute breaking point.
That timing is truly painful. A labor dispute directly colliding with a public health emergency where patient care is at direct risk.
It underscores the fragility of public health systems when they're under pressure, and the political response was swift and heated.
The health secretary criticized the timing as self-indulgent, arguing it prioritizes union demands over patient needs.
And Labor leader Keir Starmer went further, labeling the strike as irresponsible. He emphasized the potential negative impact on public health during a flu surge where hospital capacity is already maxed out.
And speaking of strain, in the U.S., shoppers under the Affordable Care Act, or ACA, are facing severe sticker shock when trying to renew or purchase health plans.
And this is a direct result of legislative stagnation. Consumers are seeing significant price increases, a situation largely attributed to congressional dithering over extending crucial tax credits that were put in place to make premiums affordable.
And this failure to act legislatively leaves millions of consumers who rely on those subsidies facing profound uncertainty and unexpected financial burden just as flu season ramps up.
It seems whether the issue is violence, judicial fairness, or healthcare affordability, the underlying theme is just a systemic strain under these massive global and domestic pressures.
Let's look at the financial and climate pressures driving many of these structural issues in our final segment.
Global economics are undergoing a significant reality check, particularly in areas tied to traditional industry, global trade, and highly speculative tech.
Starting with the UK labor market, we saw the unemployment rate tick up slightly to 5.1%, accompanied by stubbornly stagnant job vacancies.
That data indicates a broader, subdued labor market and suggests these underlying economic challenges related to post-Brexit restructuring and persistent high inflation.
But there is one important positive note. Average earnings are currently outpacing inflation,
Which offers some desperately needed relief to consumers who have really struggled with high living costs over the last few years.
But across the English Channel, the crisis is far more acute in Germany's traditional automotive heartlands.
Oh, cities like Wolfsburg, home to Volkswagen Ingolstadt for Audi, and Stuttgart are facing genuine municipal financial crises.
These local governments rely heavily on corporate tax revenues from auto sales and profits, which have just sharply declined.
And this downturn is attributed to the incredibly high, costly transition to electric vehicles and rising global competition, especially from highly efficient Chinese manufacturers.
It sounds like a transition shock that's hitting the local tax space hard.
Precisely. Ingolstadt's budget deficit projections, for example, have reportedly tripled. It's forcing local governments to consider raising public fees and, critically, cutting essential public services.
It demonstrates how a massive industrial shift, even one driven by necessary climate action, can destabilize the heart of a national economy at the local level.
And China itself isn't immune to economic deceleration, despite its massive size.
China reported its first annual investment decline in 30 years.
And that, coupled with sluggish retail sales growth, the slowest pace in 3 years, it points to these underlying structural weaknesses in the massive Chinese economy, especially in domestic consumer confidence.
Even though China achieved a record trade surplus globally, these domestic trends suggest some internal rebalancing is needed.
Now, looking at the U.S. stock market, the artificial intelligence sector is facing a sharp reality check after a period of intense, almost irrational hype.
The S&P 500 index recently retracted initial gains as AI-related stocks, including giants like Oracle and Broadcom, faced renewed pressure.
It suggests a significant market reality check. Investors are showing a definite lack of conviction about the near-term profitability of some of these hyper-valued AI companies.
And we see this same cooling effect in cryptocurrency, where Bitcoin dropped to $86,000.
Also due to a lack of conviction amidst global regulatory uncertainties and just general profit-taking.
And this volatility, coupled with speculative trading, is raising some historical red flags among financial experts.
Absolutely. One expert drew direct, provocative parallels between current Wall Street behaviors, aggressive trading, high leverage, inflated assets, and the market conditions that preceded the 1929 crash.
The warning is clear. Prudence and extreme vigilance are paramount when complacency and speculative euphoria start to take over.
Let's look at a couple of major corporate ethics and consumer protection issues, starting with Spain's massive aggressive crackdown on the short-term rental market.
Spain fined Airbnb a staggering 64 million euros, or about $75 million, for operating short-term rentals without the required local licenses.
And this is part of an aggressive, sustained crackdown aimed squarely at curbing soaring rental prices and protecting housing stability for long-term residents in cities like Barcelona and Madrid.
That sends a powerful message that local housing stability is being legally prioritized over unrestricted platform growth and tourism revenue.
It does. The size of the fine, which was calculated at 6 times Airbnb's profits from the illegal listings, demonstrates a serious regulatory commitment.
And other global cities struggling with housing costs, from New York to Paris, are watching Spain's success closely as a potential regulatory model.
Meanwhile, we have a major ethical battle happening inside the ice cream industry that pits profit against social mission.
You're talking about the long-running dispute between Unilever, the parent company, and Ben & Jerry's.
It is dramatically escalated. Unilever unilaterally removed 3 independent board members,
Prompting accusations from the Ben & Jerry's co-founders that this was a blatant power grab aimed at threatening the brand's long-standing commitment to its social mission and progressive activism.
It's a corporate governance fight over whether profit imperatives or ethical principles prevail when a brand is acquired by a multinational conglomerate.
Okay, moving from corporate governance to climate governance, we're seeing some impressive technological leaps aiming to combat climate change, specifically in identifying potent methane emissions.
The use of the GHGSat private satellite constellation is groundbreaking. It allows researchers and regulators to monitor and measure facility-level methane emissions globally from specific oil, gas, and coal operations.
And this is highly important because methane is such a potent greenhouse gas. Why is methane so critical compared to CO2?
Methane has a far greater short-term warming potential. It trapped about 80 times more heat than carbon dioxide over a 20-year period, even though it dissipates faster.
So quickly pinpointing the exact sources of major leaks or superemitters allows for highly targeted, effective regulatory interventions that can rapidly curb warming in the near term.
But the reality of climate-driven disasters remains immediate and severe globally.
We saw deadly flash floods in the Moroccan coastal city of Safi, which killed at least 37 people. It was the worst disaster in a decade.
And it prompted an immediate governmental investigation into infrastructure readiness and preparedness for these sudden extreme weather events.
Simultaneously, Delhi, India, is grappling with a thick, toxic haze. Its air quality index, or EQI, hit a severe 408.
Leading to 228 canceled flights and schools shifting online, a massive disruption caused by air quality failure.
And in the U.S. Mountain West, preparation for wildfire season is becoming a critical infrastructure issue.
Xcel Energy is taking massive precautionary measures. They're planning power shutoffs for about 500,000 customers in the Colorado Front Range communities.
And this is due to extreme fire danger risks caused by dry conditions and high winds.
It's a painful but necessary trade-off. You're sacrificing power delivery to prevent massive wildfires that could be ignited by damaged power lines. The costs of climate preparedness are becoming integrated into daily life.
On a positive note for sustainability, we are seeing a creative return to ancient technology adapted for the modern world in the shipping industry.
We're seeing innovations in green shipping. Sailing cargo ships using massive wind power systems alongside auxiliary engines are set to launch from France to the U.S. starting in 2026.
This aims to dramatically decarbonize the global shipping industry,
which currently accounts for about 3% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. It's ancient engineering sail technology solving a massive modern pollution problem.
Finally, let's briefly touch on some health and longevity breakthroughs that are directly addressing previously underserved populations.
The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the U.S., recently approved Adia, or flibanserin. It's the first libido-boosting pill specifically for older women post-menopause who are dealing with hypoactive sexual desire disorder, or HSDD.
This is a significant milestone for addressing women's sexual health issues, which have historically been really neglected by medical research and pharmaceutical development.
And linking back to the mental health and societal strain we discussed earlier, there's new research focusing on preventative cognitive care.
Experts are highlighting subtle midlife psychological symptoms, things like anxiety, generalized mood changes, difficulty concentrating as potential biomarkers for an increased risk of developing dementia later in life.
And this crucial finding urges people to seek early intervention and just highlights the profound importance of proactive psychological care and mental health support for long-term cognitive health, not just for immediate well-being.
What an incredible, sprawling survey of the world we inhabit. If we synthesize these sources, we see a world caught between these massive tectonic structural shifts.
The geopolitical alignment around Ukraine, the ideological pivots in Latin America, the high-stress market correction in the tech sector.
And at the same time, these deeply personal foundational crises, domestic violence, mental health collapse, infrastructure failure.
That's the duality, isn't it? We've seen humanity grappling with complex interstellar physics, mapping dark matter with cosmic voids.
And yet simultaneously rediscovering the secrets of self-healing ancient Roman engineering. The intellectual pace is dizzying, but the human problems are just painfully slow to solve.
For me, one of the most surprising scientific nuggets have to be that lemon-shaped exoplanet, PSR J23222650b, with its molecular carbon atmosphere orbiting a pulsar. It's truly forcing a complete re-examination of planetary formation theories in these extreme environments.
And on the human side, the sheer sudden tragedy of the Rob Reiner family murder, immediately complicated by his son's history of addiction and then the subsequent politicization of it all, that was profoundly shocking.
I also love the specific aggressive regulatory action taken by Spain, finding Airbnb that's staggering 64 million euros. It shows that local governments can and will prioritize long-term housing stability over platform growth.
So if we look at all that ambition and genius, the immense resources poured into mapping cosmic voids, developing $134 billion AI companies, innovating massive wind-powered shipping solutions, it makes you pause.
It makes you reflect on our collective focus.
So what does this all mean as you carry this knowledge forward?
Well, consider this. What does it truly say about our collective priorities when we can apply massive resources and genius to solving cosmic mysteries and building multi-billion-dollar technological empires?
Yet foundational, essential human safety issues, like stemming domestic rage, providing sufficient crisis-level mental health support, and even protecting essential workers in our crumbling public health services continue to fail on a massive societal scale.
A crucial thought to carry forward as we process the news of the day.
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll be here next time, ready to sort through the chaos.
For enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.